Welcome to Digital Currents, brought to you by Morgan Creek Digital. I'm Xavier Segura. Each episode, we spotlight the topics and people changing the tech industry with a focus on AI, blockchain, chips, and big data. Thanks for listening, and please make sure to subscribe if you like what you hear. And remember, stay current.
All right. Welcome to this week's edition of Digital Currents Solo. So X is traveling back from the Middle East, but I figured I would go ahead and do a show solo for a couple of reasons. One, to celebrate the huge week that we had with a couple of portfolio companies going public. We talked a little bit about that last week, but I thought I would kind of go over some of the origin story for those investments and just talk, wax poetic, I guess, or reminisce over the journey that we've been on since we started this Morgan Creek Digital thing back in 2018. So quick reveal. So, mint today because, I'm done with college football. No, I'm just kidding. I love the Irish. But I do have the Irish belt on. I got the orange pants. And I went way old school with the original Bitcoin sock game that I got back in 2017. And most people don't remember this, but, the original Bitcoin logo wasn't a B. It was actually a BC, and it was yellow. And then it changed to just the B. And then it changed, I think, in 2018, mid-2018, to the orange that we all love today. So, if we're going to talk old school, might as well wear old school. So that's what we're doing today. But if you go back to that point in time, so 2018, when we made the investment in Figure, one of the first investments out of Morgan Creek Digital, what was going on and kind of how did we get there? So, most of you heard the true origin story that, Dan Moore called me in 2013. He said, come to San Francisco. I want to tell you what's going on with the fund. And he was shutting it down. Said he was going to spend the rest of his career in Bitcoin and blockchain. And my joke is, not running drugs on Silk Road, not a cryptography student, didn't really understand what Bitcoin was. In fact, I don't have a chart of the week, but I guess I can do a mini chart of the week. So this is what will suffice as the chart of the week. So, Bitcoin has gone from, 0.05 cents to $116,000. And we'll talk about that. But, in 2013, it was about $50 odd per Bitcoin. And I didn't really understand the technology. I hadn't spent any time to understand the technology, but I did understand blockchain technology, not like the intricacies of it. I still don't understand the intricacies of it. I don't understand the intricacies of, voice over IP and a lot of, cell phones. But I did understand the decentralized network operating system element of blockchain enough to have made a couple investments on the VC side. So investing in Dan's venture fund seemed like a no-brainer, but I should have obviously invested in his Bitcoin fund, the best performing fund in history. But over the next 4 years, I spent, time off and on, had the day job, but was trying to understand this emerging technology. And one of the challenges to understanding new technology is as you do the work and as you start to get excited about it, people start banging you down and telling you, oh, that'll never work. And look, the incumbents want to tell you it'll never work because they don't want to lose their incumbency role. And people who don't spend any time on it, like, oh, that'll never work. It's just some crazy idea because they haven't done any work on it. And then you've got, competing technologies or competing ideas that tell you it won't work. So there's a lot of the boo birds. And it's interesting. I had a clip last night of Stan Druckenmiller talking about this, and I relabeled it that I think actually what he said in this clip might be the most important piece of investing advice ever. And it's a big statement, and I'm prone to hyperbole, right? But I really do think it is the most important. And what he said is the key is to buy it and then do the research on it. Because if you wait to do the research, it still may be okay. But he said what often happens is things will move, and then you psychologically won't be able to engage because you're like, oh, I missed it. It went from, $10 to $20 and I can't buy it now or whatever it is. And I think that clearly happened a little bit in Bitcoin to a lot of people and to digital technologies to a lot of people. This is something also that, I've been very lucky in life to spend a lot of time in the hedge fund space, and I allocated capital to, some of the greatest investors of all time. Just by happenstance, we happened to cross paths with, the likes of Stan Druckenmiller and Julian Robertson and Michael Steinhardt and all kinds of people, Chase Coleman, et cetera. So I think what's interesting is in that process of allocating, some things aren't going to work out. And the second best, and I noted this in the retweet, the second best piece of advice is the combo of sell your losers quickly. Don't double down, right? Never do that. Sell your losers quickly and have the uncanny ability to double up. So buy more of what's working, do more of what's working. And so that definitely happened kind of between 2013 and 2017 when we started to think about Morgan Creek Digital. That definitely occurred in the sense that, I wasn't quick enough in 13 to just put money in Dan's fund and just try it, or to just open up a wallet and put some in it. But by 14 and into, I've told the story in early 14, I wrote about it. Clients were like, oh my God, this is ridiculous. You're an idiot. We'll fire you. We actually did lose some clients over it. And I was gonna read some excerpts without naming names of some emails that I got in that time period of kind of 2016, 17, where people were saying, look, you're fired and you guys are idiots and this will never work. Even partners in my own firm were like, no, we're not going to do this. So there was a lot of pushback because it was a big new idea. But I think it was that process of dipping the toe in, iterating, having the experience, went through a lot of ups and downs and pain. But all this comes back to why 2018 was big, why Figure was one of our, or one of our earliest investments. And look, we did a webinar last night, Thursday, called, Wall Street Goes Digital, and celebrating, because it was a celebration of a very big week for us. And, one of our partners, Sachin, was on the bell ringing tower twice in 2 days, once for Figure, once for Gemini. And then, on Monday, there's another big IPO with, or celebration of the IPO with the bell ringing for ABTC, which is the Trump family mining company. But the fact that there are these digital asset businesses going public, getting lots of attention, stock prices doing well, I think is worth celebrating. But the other point we were talking about is that this is a meaningful trend, that this digitization of the financial services world is a big deal. And that was the aha moment for me on this journey was, we decided to pursue Morgan Creek Digital in 2017. And our first plan was to do what we had always done, right? Which was to be a fund of funds and allocate capital to other emerging funds in the space. The problem was there weren't very many funds. I mean, in the private side, there was Pantera and there was Blockchain Capital, and there were a couple starting to get formed, but there was no A16Z crypto. There was no Paradigm. So in allocating to the private side, really, so we're going to do a hybrid and do some private and some hedge funds. There were a few hedge funds that were getting started, but most of them were trying to do the arbitrage strategy, between the different exchanges, like the old days of the Pacific Exchange and then, Chicago Exchange. And you could drive a truck through the Gap or London versus the US. And that was happening in the Bitcoin markets. And so, but that really wasn't the type of return profile we were looking at with this innovative technology. And Pomp came and said, no, we're not going to do a fund of funds. We're going to do a fund. And I'm like, how are we going to just do a fund? How are we going to become a venture fund? And we did do it. And we got super lucky. Talk about this all the time. Very grateful. Met the two guys, guy and gal, guys, in the Joysy kind of use guys way, who, really changed our lives in the sense of they embraced this vision and enabled us to put that first fund up. And it was called Blockchain Opportunity Fund 1. And the idea was that blockchain was going to revolutionize financial services the way the internet revolutionized commerce and media. And that premise was partly fomented or partly formed from this conversation I had with Mike Cagney. And the way the story went down is I was out in San Francisco with Pomp. We were meeting with some hedge fund types and going to meet with Dan and his crew and thinking about what we were going to do for our new fund, and bumped into Mike Cagney. He said, hey, come on upstairs and into the new office, and June and I are working on this new project. And look, I'd known Mike for 20 plus years, invested with him as a hedge fund guy, invested with him at SoFi. And it was really interesting to listen to what he described. And, the team was like 4 or 5 people, but the vision was so robust and so profound that he said, look, DTCC exists today. So when we trade securities, right, you don't own securities, I don't own securities, you don't own your money, I don't own my money. And we put our money in the bank, it's the bank's money, and we have this IOU, these ones and zeros that we can, move around within, certain permission limits. And with our stocks, our securities, we actually give them to the brokerage firm. They actually are registered in the street name of UBS or Merrill Lynch or whoever. And then we have an IOU for those. So we basically trade the IOUs back and forth. But in the brokerage world, in the securities world, there's this thing called DTCC where there's this physical paper, stock certificates or bonds, that sits in file drawers, and then they create CUSIPs. And then we trade the CUSIPs on these electronic exchanges. And that all sounds really antiquated and expensive. And Mike was like, yeah, June designed and actually helped write the code for this new blockchain that would displace that. Now, that's a really bold, plan to displace a 2 trillion quadrillion, 15 zeros, forget trillion, quadrillion, 2 quadrillion dollars a year of flow across that platform. And it's owned by the banks, and they kind of like the dividends that they get from it. So displacing that was going to be hard, right? You got big incumbents, you got entrenched systems, you got all these COBOL systems that run on it. But it was a compelling vision, and I bought into it. And so I called Pomp and I said, hey, come over and meet with Mike. And so he went this way and I went that way, and he went up and met. And I'll never forget, he called me afterwards and says, oh my God, we have to do this. And, remember, Pomp was not a financial services guy. I mean, he had been in growth in Facebook and Snap and, been in the Army. And so for him to see it that quickly from the financial services perspective, and he's gone on to build great things at ProCap. But I think it was interesting how quickly Mike could communicate his vision to someone who was not a finance pro. And that was another aha moment for me that this had to be an important part. And so we put about 10% of our fund one in that, little smaller than the Bitcoin position. And also remember the timing of this in that, this chart looks like it goes straight up and it does, but it has a lot of this. So this was, March, April of 2018. Bitcoin had just gone from 20,000 in December 18th to be precise, down to about 8,000 when we took the meeting. And I remember 8,000 is physical because we talked about it in the meeting. And I think it took a little bit of chutzpah, took a little bit of guts for us to say, yeah, we're compelled by this. And I think another thing we did pretty well, and I don't want to pat ourselves on the back too much for this, but we actually didn't rush out and buy Bitcoin at 8. We actually waited till first quarter of 2019, and our average cost was sub 5,000. Started buying around 3,800, and so there was some discipline there. And so we avoided the drop when it went from 6 to 3 in November. But we did invest in Figure right away, and again put 10% of the fund assets, and we're still locked up, and we still won't be able to sell or distribute those shares to investors until early next year. Very excited about that, and excited for Mike and June and the whole Figure team and what they're building, and they're just getting started, right? He did a recording with Pomp, podcast. But it's great, kind of origin story and lessons and more of the history. But Mike is just getting started. And this transition from the old world to the new world is just getting started. So there's a lot of wood to chop and a lot of work to do, and a lot of value to be created. So, but I do think another thing that's interesting about the impact of Figure on the Morgan Creek digital journey is, Mike let us co-lead his Series B and then Series C and Series D. And look, we were a little $41 million fund back in 2018. And saying, why? And I really appreciate, because he's told the story. He's like, look, you guys were different. So look, if I had another Silicon Valley firm, I get the same relationship, same ideas, same, training background. You guys were the right coast firm, not the left coast firm. And, Mark's an old guy like me out of the financial services, not a techie, not an engineer, thinks about this from a financial services disruption lens. And that's valuable. And I think, we've had two different people, Pomp and Sachin, sit on the board and have added tremendous value there as well. So it was foundational for us as a way to embrace one of the earliest innovators and pioneers in the digital space that crossed over in this area that we specifically identified as a major theme, which was the disruption of financial services, which again is just starting. And that means banking, insurance, brokerage, payments, all of it. Like all of it. And I've said this over and over and over long before Larry Fink said it. And Larry Fink's more successful than me, so I'm not making fun of him, but I've been saying this for literally 8 years. And he just started saying it, that every stock, every bond, every currency, every commodity, everything, every private business, every collectible, piece of art, that thing, all of it will be digitized and tokenized. It won't actually physically be converted into digital, but it will be tokenized. And the ownership of assets will exist in the digital realm, in the decentralized realm, not in these centralized AWS farms, where, the broker actually owns your securities. No, we will own our securities. We will own our money. We collectively will own things. And that's, read, Web 1, write, Web 2, own, Web 3, Chris Dixon, shout out to the Read, Write, Own book. But it's that evolution of the technology that allows us to create unique digital assets, or unique assets in the digital realm, which is, what Eric Schmidt said about Satoshi, that, Bitcoin's great. But really, it's the idea that you can create a unique asset in the digital realm. Huge businesses are going to be built on that. And I actually didn't match my shirt with the cup intentionally, but it's kind of nice look. So here we are. Figure has gone public. Is, I think, on its way to becoming one of the important companies. As is Coinbase, right, which was also one of our early investments, and really excited about that. Now, we weren't as early as Adam Draper and, writing a $100K check, but when all is said and done, and then the Bitcoin will return multiples of the fund. But the nice thing about the strategy around building a fund focused on the disruption of financial services is there will be lots of big companies that are created, and we've had some that didn't work out, and, we thought digital lending was going to be a really big thing, and I think it will be a really big thing. And unfortunately, the intrepid first few got the arrows from the incumbents and, got shut down. But, we've got a next wave of lending, and you've seen companies like Circle rise up. We didn't do that one, unfortunately, but you can't get them all. But there are meaningful businesses that are now going to become the, not the Mag 7 per se, but the pillars of the new financial system. So Gemini was another IPO last week that we got to celebrate. That was exciting. Really great to see the vision again that the Winklevoss twins had come to fruition. Now, they won't be the number one, exchange. That Coinbase clearly has that place, but around the world, some of the best investments are the exchanges, and every market definitely has one, but many markets have two, sometimes even three, and those secondary markets and tertiary markets can be very, very valuable. And what happens in the digital realm, and I think Gemini has done a good job of this, you can go beyond your core market, right? You can open up a perpetuals future market in Asia and start to see that grow when, they're fighting the headwinds under the Gensler. But the thing about Gemini that I really admire is, and we've talked about this, is it's rare to get a big idea in your lifetime. Most of us have plenty of good ideas or, smaller, but to get a really big idea, like inventing social media, I mean, that was a pretty big idea. And, arguably they were there, and whether it was Zuck or them or whoever, it doesn't really matter which side, but they were there. And then to do it not once, but not twice, but not three times, but four times. So then, they got ahead of Bitcoin long before everybody, right? I mean, if you've read Bitcoin Billionaires, which you should, it's a great book. Ben Mezrich is such a great writer, or Mezrich, I'm not sure how you say it. But such a great book. And so they were earlier. Then they saw NFTs and they bought Nifty Gateway. Now the execution of Nifty Gateway versus OpenSea out executed, and that's what good leadership can do. You can't win every time. Like you can't win every rowing race. So, Nifty Gateway, they were first, but they didn't execute quite as well as OpenSea. But they were there, right? And then a fourth time to have one of the key exchanges and the second to go public. So, bravo to them as always, and great partners, and it's been fun to watch that. So as we think about this evolution of financial services and the evolution, the journey of Morgan Creek Digital, as I sat back kind of reminiscing over the past week and thinking about, one, it's certainly validating when things that you thought might be able to happen, and I used to write a lot, and I used to write these very long letters, and I wrote these two letters that really like, who is Satoshi Nakamoto? So it was one. Actually, there were three. One was called The Virus is Spreading. Talked about, not all viruses are bad, and viral in digital age is a good thing, which we all understand. And then there was one about who's Satoshi Nakamoto. And then there was one called The Digital Gold Rush. And I was going to read some excerpts of that today, but I'm sparing you because I don't like my voice. I don't like hearing my voice. So I appreciate y'all listening. But I decided me reading would probably sound rather stiff. But if you're interested, they're out there on the internet. I can probably find a way to post them in show notes or something. But the points that I wrote about were, that in the gold rush, the guy who got the wealthiest was not the best miner, right? Not the person who found the biggest nugget. It was Sam Brannan, who sold all the picks and shovels and pots and pans and $6 eggs. Think about $6 egg in 1843 or 1849. That was an expensive egg. So he picks and shovels was what it was all about. So our early funds were all about the picks and shovels of this new financial age. And then this idea of who is Satoshi and why is Satoshi important? Why is Bitcoin important? And understanding that at the base layer of money, gold has been that for 5,000 years, but it suffers from two things. One, if I had a bar of gold here, right? I would say if I were Kyle Bass, I'd reach under my table and I'd pull out my Krugerrands. And if I had a bar, I couldn't break it in half. I'm not strong enough. And even if I could, I couldn't stuff it in the computer and send it to y'all, even if I wanted to. But with a couple taps on my phone, I can send anybody with a wallet Bitcoin. It's more divisible and it's more portable. So it has all the scarcity features and it's more divisible and portable. So I do think the next 5,000 plus years will be the Bitcoin standard, Saifedean's book. Lots of books today. So I do think that's real, and I do think that's going to happen. And then this other idea that as blockchain technology evolves and as digital technology evolves and as we move into the digital age, things that we kind of take for granted, like ownership, just go to the bank and try to move a large amount of your money. There are a whole bunch of questions that get asked, and there are a whole bunch and if you're trying to do it on a Saturday when the bank's closed, it's a problem. And there are wire fees involved. And if you want to do it across border, there's fees, and then there's Western Union fees, and then there's Visa fees, and all of this gets disrupted by this new technology, and it creates incredible opportunities. So as I thought about that journey, one, the gratitude I had for Dan for kind of exposing me to this new idea. The gratitude I had for people like John Burbank, who was also an early adopter out in San Fran, that helped me understand some of the technological pieces that I really wasn't good at. Cagney and his just brilliance and his not only his passion and his intellect, but man, the man he's just an animal. I mean, he is the great epitome of just the get it done CEO who is going to will things into being, and is going to get people to follow and is going to get people to invest. So that's been great. And then also gratitude for being in a place where I could do what I'm doing now, which I'm having more fun than I've ever had. And that's not a criticism chapter 1 and chapter 2. I loved working for not-for-profits. I loved Morgan Creek Capital Management, but Morgan Creek Digital and being a late in life venture capitalist is extraordinary because the time I get to spend with founders doing incredible things and bringing these new ideas. And as we've evolved beyond just financial services and the picks and shovels of the digital financial age into the ABCDs of the digital age, AI, blockchain, chips, data, and understanding that at the root of everything we do today is data. And data is everywhere. It's all around us. It's big, it's unstructured, but it's like oil, right? Underground, kind of valuable. It's got value if you could extract it, at a right price. If you could refine it, distribute it, use it. Same thing with data. Data in a data lake, not really that useful, but if you can organize it properly using blockchain technology, if you can analyze it properly using compute, if you can make decisions with it properly using AI as a tool, all of this starts to come together. So as we've, expanded the portfolio beyond just, the replacement of gold as money with Bitcoin, which is a big part of our early investments, still part of our investments, but relative to venture capital potential returns, and other technologies like we're seeing in AI, although some of the AI valuations are pretty crazy. Look what's happening in quantum. Those valuations are super crazy in the public market. But in the private markets, we're finding some interesting opportunities in people who are making real strides. Now, commercialization of quantum is a long way away. And what's that going to do for digital assets and encryption? And yeah, there are things that are going to have to be created. But remember, encryption was created once the computing infrastructure allowed it, right? To do SHA-256 encryption, you had to have enough processing power and enough speed and enough memory to make it work. So, we've been doing encryption, whether it was ciphers or whether it was decoder rings, for a long time. But the technology, and so when we have quantum that could break current, encryption, we'll have quantum encryption models. So, human ingenuity will solve the problems, as it always does. So as we think about opportunity sets, as we think about, where we see the future, the nice thing in doing your job is to every once in a while have the luxury to step back and think. I tell a story that I've a little embroidered, I guess it's cross stitched. She does embroidery now, but now it's cross stitching. Back then it was cross stitching. And I had heard that, at the top of every door at IBM's main campus, they had just this single word, think. And you were supposed to kick back, put your feet up on your desk and occasionally just think, because that's how you're going to come up with new ideas. If you're always constantly doing your work and doing tasks, you don't have any time to ideate. And so I had Stacy, cross stitch me the think, and it's in my desk drawer. And when I'd open, I'd remember to think. And so spending some time thinking about past and the history and the journey, but also thinking about the future and where we see opportunity. And we aren't the type of firm that is going to come up with the big ideas. Like, I don't have the talent, of Chamath, who read a story about the Grok guy at Google and said, well, tensor processing units, that sounds really interesting. We went from CPUs to GPUs to TPUs, and that sounds interesting, but I don't think it should just be for Grok. I mean, I don't think it should just be for Google. It should be for mankind. I mean, frothy, but okay. So I'm going to pull that team out and set them up in a company, and I'm going to back them. That's not what we do very well. I mean, we're not going to have the big picture, see the future. But what we are able to do is meet the CEO of that business, Sonny, and really say, boy, I want to back what that guy's working on. and meet Jonathan and understand his vision for this next level of compute, and say understand enough of how CPUs work serially to GPUs parallel, but still 2 dimensions versus 3 dimensions, and then have TPUs and VPUs and LPUs and all these things that are going to move us into the 3-dimensional age. And that knowledge of, but access to the talent is the part of the venture business that I absolutely love, is getting exposed to that talent and then being able to partner with them and have them build and have us benefit on behalf of our shareholders, our LPs, is the exciting part of what we're doing. So as you sit back and you reflect, you're like, okay, so the idea of financial services migrating to digital platforms, fully ensconced, fully happening, still early, maybe 10, 15% of the way, but definitely that's been proven out, and we can continue to back that. As we think about, the next set of operation or next set of opportunities, it's, the application layer. So in Web 1, Web 2, all the value went to the application layer. None of it went to the protocol layer. In Web 3, most of the value so far has gone to the protocol layer, in terms of Bitcoin and Ethereum, et cetera, and less to the application layer, but that's starting to change. And those dApps, those decentralized applications are going to start to rise, and DeFi is starting to come back, and you're seeing things get announced on new chains. Avalanche made a bunch of announcements this week, and we've seen what's going on with Ethereum and now Solana. Are there issues? Sure. Are there things that have to get solved? Wash trading and wallets making the activity on a certain chain look bigger than it is? Sure. But the adoption is happening, and the integration of blockchain technology into all of these, not just financial services, but all the things peripheral to financial services is happening. And so whether it's payments, whether it's remittances, whether it's, titles, I was talking to someone this morning who said that, there's a company that is basically putting in Brazil, all of car titles on chain. It's interesting, very interesting. The old days of having a paper title that has to get mailed to you and it could get lost or it could burn up in a fire. That's a less secure way of having it than digital records. And digital records that aren't controlled or owned by a centralized authority are superior, decentralized better than centralized. And there's so much happening in that series of evolutions in terms of ownership, transactions, and provenance, right? Which is hence why Figure called their blockchain provenance. I think that's another piece of this digital technology that's so important, is proving that something is actual. It's just funny. I had this conversation with Stacy last night. She said, "Hey, there's a story about such and such athlete that, bailed out this failing restaurant." And then she's like, "Oh, wait a second." And it's the same story as a week ago with this other athlete, and the same. So the bots are literally taking content and recreating it just to get engagement. And you can't tell at first glance what's real, or videos that are being shown around the whole, thing that has been going on. You don't know what's real and what isn't. Well, blockchains can help with that. You can stamp things as authentic. And what Bitcoin in particular is, and proof of work actually does, it's a time chain, right? Anything that then gets put on chain gets time stamped, and and authenticated so that it can't be duplicated. It can't be altered. It can't be changed. And so in a world where digital and AI and, I just saw this. So my grandkids have been obsessed, and that's the right word, with this movie. It's the number one movie on Netflix. It's a K-pop Demon Hunters, which is kind of an interesting combination of things. But, the music's catchy. And, my little 7-year-old granddaughter is bopping around singing this K-pop song. Well, I understand the newest K-pop sensation is an AI, and her, I guess if you can call it a her, as a female AI, is in the video is beaten on the number one K-pop band. I guess they're a band, group. I guess they're a group. By not by name, but by image and symbolism. Basically, putting it in her hand, and then it like flows out like sand or blood. And it's clever, right? And they're saying it was created all by AI, and that this artist who's behind it, is she really an artist or is she a producer? I don't know if the AI did all the work or did she prompt it to do certain things. I don't really know the answer, but it is interesting that supposedly this AI is now been booked with a music deal and a tour. Like, are we going to go to a concert and watch a screen of an AI? I don't know. It is interesting in the sense that I wouldn't have thought a while ago that people would pay $1,000 to sit in an arena and watch other people play a video game. But that's exactly what happens at the Fortnite World Championships. And the winner of the Fortnite World Championship makes as much as the winner of Wimbledon, which is kind of amazing. 14-year-old kid makes $3.5 million. So I don't know, maybe. I still like the human band experience, but if the tune's catchy, I'll listen. And most of music is audio, not visual, although a performance of a screen, and will there eventually be hologram, image on screen or on stage? Yeah, probably. I don't know. So it's an interesting thing to think about. And then you go down the whole thing about, well, are we going to go watch robots play soccer instead of humans play soccer, like in a stadium? I don't know. I watched, someone tried to do it. It was pretty bad. it was awful. So I would not watch that. But will there come a day when robots could do what a human does? I'm going to take the under on that. But could there be some sort of game that robots play that we go watch? Sure. I don't know. What's the one with the kids the play where you're driving a car and trying to hit the ball into the goal? That could happen. So, strange thing. There's team handball, for God's sake. So, that's an interesting left turn or right turn, depending on which way I went, away from what we were talking about. But I will probably close here. You've been listening to me ramble for 45 minutes. To say a couple things. One, thank you to anyone and everyone who has been a supporter of and partner with Morgan Creek Digital and Morgan Creek Capital all these years. I think it's interesting. It's our 21st year. I think that's interesting, given how important 21 is numerology with Bitcoin and digital. And it's exciting that we are here to celebrate some big wins in the portfolio, and I'm really happy for our investors, and happy for the founders and the employees and the teams, and it's fun to see big ideas come to fruition. So grateful to all of those who support us. Grateful to everybody who listens to us on a weekly basis and makes Digital Currents part of their Saturday morning routine. have the Saturday coffee, as I call it. So a big thank you. X will be back next week, and we'll go back to our normal show. But remind everyone to rate, review, and subscribe, as he does better than I. And then also remind everybody to stay current.
Thank you for joining us this week on Digital Currents. Check out our links to our website and social media in the show's description box. Please make sure to subscribe if you like what you hear. And remember, stay current.
This podcast should not be construed as investment advice nor solicitation for the sale of any security, advisory, or other service. Investment themes and ideas discussed may be owned by funds managed by the host and podcast guests. Any conflicts at the time of production have been mentioned by the host but are subject to change. Listeners should consult their personal financial advisors before making any investment decisions.